Hey guys, today I'll show you an apocalyptic horror TV series named Love You as the World Ends, Season 2 and Season 3. Spoilers ahead, watch out and take care. The drama begins during the zombie apocalypse right after the survivor Hibiki and his group finally defeat the villainous Dr. Shuto, rescuing his long-sought-after girlfriend Kurumi. Unfortunately, the Yokosuka base has been completely overrun by zombies. The survivors had to find another shelter. Due to an urgent need for Yuzuki's asthma medication, her mother chooses to head towards the newly discovered Hope Home Refuge. The rest of the survivors decide to stay and live on the island. 3 weeks have passed. Everyone on the island lives peacefully, each doing their part. Some are responsible for armed patrols, others for fishing and farming. It appears to be a haven of peace. Hibiki and Kurumi have begun living a happy life. However, the lurking dangers start to surface one by one. The first problem arises with Kurumi. Mysterious blood-colored patterns occasionally appear on her arm, which make her feel uneasy. As the senior assistant to Dr. Shuto, Yoon is worried more because she knows that the doctor had injected Kurumi with the zombie virus, and it was only due to her body having antibodies that she didn't turn by far. But nobody can predict when she might turn. Next, while Hibiki and another survivor, Hiragi, are searching the island for supplies, they don't find anything useful but do discover several zombies with cross-shaped wounds. After discussing with the group, everyone realizes that the island isn't absolutely safe. With supplies running low, Hibiki proposes that everyone move to the new refuge. However, the bearded man named Yohei disagrees, pointing out that they don't know the precise location of the refuge and it would be extremely dangerous to head there. So Hibiki plans to send a scout team ahead but doesn't know who should be sent. Hibiki, Kurumi, and the military captain Sota volunteer to go to find the refuge, but Hibiki disagrees with Kurumi because she is the team's doctor here. This leads to an argument and Hiragi becomes wildly jealous. She asks why Kurumi's life is more valuable than others, leaving Hibiki at a loss for words. After the meeting, a sexy girl from Kawada's gang volunteers to go look for the refuge, but she is rejected by Kawada. He doesn't want to lose any more companions, to be exact, the sexy ones. The blood-colored patterns on Kurumi's hands are getting worse, and coincidentally, Hiragi catches a glimpse of it. She then goes to ask Hiro, the former police officer. Seeing him stammering, Hiragi realizes that Kurumi has been infected with the zombie virus. Seeing this, Hiro can only ask her to keep it a secret to avoid causing unnecessary trouble for Kurumi. But he doesn't realize that trouble is quickly approaching. While patrolling the woods, the sexy girl suddenly hears strange noises. She quickly draws her blade to protect her sexy body and vigilantly looks around. The scene shifts to Kurumi walking out from the forest, her eyes dim and her expression dazed. She remains in a sleepwalking state until Hibiki arrives and disrupts it. Kurumi, as if awakening from a dream, is flustered. She has no choice but to tell Hibiki about the strange things happening to her. Because of the increasingly active virus inside her, she often becomes mentally dazed and even experiences episodes of memory loss. She is afraid that the antibodies in her body will lose their effectiveness and she'll eventually turn into a zombie. Hibiki holds her in his arms, comforting her using his muscles first and words later, promising to find a way to eradicate the virus. However, he loses himself and decides to confide in Kawada, who has experience managing large teams. Kawada advises Hibiki that as the team leader, he shouldn't consider everyone's opinions as he did before. Being decisive is more effective. But Hibiki insists that his approach is not wrong. At this point, Sota brings a walkie-talkie to Hibiki. The person on the other side claims to be from the refuge and was introduced by Yuzuki's mother, who had left the survivors group earlier. They specifically want to talk to Hibiki. Soon, Hibiki and Sota meet a messenger from the refuge. It turns out he had learned from Yuzuki's mother that there are several doctors here and wants to exchange medicine and food for one of the doctors to help at the refuge. Hibiki detects the loopholes in his words. When Yuzuki's mother left for the refuge, the island only had one doctor, Kurumi. She didn't know that Dr. Yoon arrived later. Under threat and temptation, the messenger has to confess that the refuge has been observing Hibiki without any malicious intent. They even want to invite Hibiki to visit the refuge. While they are still talking, another incident occurs outside. Kawada discovers that his most beloved sexy teammate has been bitten by a zombie. Seeing that she's about to turn, he reluctantly ends her sexy life to preserve her beauty. But the incident doesn't end there. Kawada is puzzled. There shouldn't be any zombies on this island. How could she have been bitten by a zombie? Upon hearing this, Hiragi knows about Kurumi carrying the zombie virus and ultimately reveals Kurumi's secret in front of everyone. Everyone is shocked when they hear it. But Dr. Yoon defends Kurumi, saying that her body has antibodies and she won't turn into a zombie even if she's infected. But these words alone can't dispel everyone's fear and doubt. Kuwata is extremely angry, points a gun at Kurumi, questioning her about where she was the night before and whether it was her who bit the sexy girl. Kurumi indeed spent a long time in a sleepwalking state the night before and can't confirm whether she did it or not. Seeing her like this, everyone becomes even more suspicious. Hibiki returns at this moment, but everyone accuses him of hiding the fact that Kurumi is infected. Since he can't prove that the incident is unrelated to Kurumi, he can only watch helplessly as his girlfriend is taken into custody. But Hiro, who had a crush on Kurumi, couldn't tolerate her suffering, so he quickly set her chicken body free. Kuwata, hell-bent on avenging his sexy teammate, was not satisfied with merely imprisoning Kurumi. He even encouraged everyone to expel Kurumi, the virus carrier, from the island. Everyone present tacitly agreed, with only Hibiki and Yoon voting against. But their votes could not sway the outcome. Even Hibiki's earliest supporters, Yohei and Hiragi, did not side with him this time. Seeing this, Hibiki left the room in utter disappointment, deciding to leave with Kurumi. In truth, Kurumi had decided to leave on her own to avoid burdening everyone, but she didn't expect to be caught up by Hibiki before she got far. After his repeated persuasion, she finally agreed to join him in seeking a solution. After Hibiki left, Yohei and others were very downcast. Kuwata seized the chance to take over command of the entire group, intending to become a full-fledged dictator. Suddenly, someone came to report that the real culprit had been found. The sexy girl was not bitten by Kurumi, but by a zombie with a cross-shaped scar. Seeing this, Kuwata couldn't help but vent his anger by slaying the zombie, sending it straight to meet Zombie Satan. The others realized they had wrongfully blamed Kurumi and Hibiki, but alas, there is no antidote for regret. Meanwhile, Hibiki and Kurumi were on their way to the said refuge. Before long, Kurumi once again fell into a sleepwalking state. Hibiki had no choice but to place her in an abandoned house. He soon realized that Kurumi's condition was deteriorating and she could turn into a zombie at any moment. Kurumi was also well aware of this and once again begged Hibiki to leave her to pursue his dreams. But naturally, Hibiki would not give up. Suddenly, the sound of a zombie's roar came from outside. Hibiki stepped out of the house, shooting arrows at those far away and wrestling with those close by. He seemed determined to vent all his frustrations on the zombies. Kurumi's zombie virus finally erupted. The red lines on her hand became more dense, spreading to her face, even turning one of her eyes red. Sometime later, Hibiki, covered in blood, returned to the house after dealing with the zombies outside. Kurumi, as if she didn't recognize him, panicked and fled the house, running and screaming for help in a chicken voice. She was met halfway by a stranger. Seeing Hibiki covered in blood, the stranger assumed him to be a threat. He didn't listen to Hibiki's explanations and engaged him in muscle wrestling, but the stranger had an accomplice who ambushed him from behind, knocking him unconscious. When Hibiki woke up again, he found himself in a spacious and bright place, which was also fully equipped with living facilities, including a solar power station and a planting greenhouse. Hibiki explored around and finally found a group of content humans. Among them was the messenger, whom he had encountered before. Without a doubt, he knew he was in the Hope Home refuge. At the other end of the refuge, an elderly man who appeared to be a doctor received a report about Hibiki's arrival. He turned serious without uttering a word. Kurumi, who had also awakened by then, was questioned by the man who had saved her earlier. However, she couldn't answer anything as she had obviously lost all her memory due to the zombie virus inside her. Seeing that, Hibiki was suffering and could only beg Ren, the son of the refugee's founder, to treat Kurumi well. The messenger, who had previously met Hibiki, introduced the background of the refuge. It was originally intended to be a resort, but the outbreak of the zombie virus occurred before it opened. The resort's founder foresaw the crisis and prepared a large amount of supplies early on, transforming the place into a refuge based on military base standards. At this point, Hibiki met Yuzuki and her mother, who had entered the refuge earlier. He was overjoyed to see them again, and under their guidance, he enjoyed fresh fruits and vegetables that he hadn't had in a long time. However, the atmosphere was a bit strange. The original inhabitants of the refuge naturally resented newcomers like Yuzuki and her mother. Back on the island, Kawata was still grieving over the death of his sexy teammate, and his temperament became increasingly volatile. He always had a cold face towards Hibiki's followers. Seeing the food resources on the island dwindling, Kawata didn't consult with everyone but prepared to lead them to seize the refuge and rob the food, and incidentally, to avenge his teammate. Yohei and others were angry but dared not speak up. The bald man was the first to challenge him with his bald head, but Kawata was adamant. His orders were absolute, and anyone who disobeyed would be killed. The bald man wanted to argue further, but Kawata pulled out a bald gun and ended the bald man's bald life. Moreover, his body was hung outside as a deterrent to others. Hiro, looking at the body in front of him, remembered Hibiki's request to take care of everyone before he left. So he thought of a compromise and finally persuaded Kawata to infiltrate the refuge with a few people first to ascertain their strength. They could then discuss the matter of seizing the refuge later. Over at the refuge, Hibiki learned from his conversations that the place was not as strong as he thought. The only doctor was just a researcher from a pharmaceutical company, and his health was in terrible shape. When Hibiki came in, he was surprised to discover that this elderly doctor was actually his long-missing father. He had been searching for his father for years, even presuming him dead. He couldn't understand how his father could have abandoned him. The old man seemed to have his reasons, offering only repeated apologies without any explanation. Hibiki clearly couldn't accept this and had no intention of acknowledging his father. He simply asked about Kurumi's condition coolly. The old man had previously examined Kurumi. She was in a state of coexistence with the zombie virus, which had caused memory impairment due to its side effects. There was a high probability of her turning into a zombie under such conditions. However, the old doctor thought of a potential cure. He had heard that the medical university in Fukushima had developed a serum that could suppress the proliferation of the virus, and this could perhaps cure Kurumi. After hearing this, Hibiki left the room without saying a word. Not long after he left, the old doctor's body suddenly bent over in pain, clearly in the throes of some disease. Hibiki also noticed that the original inhabitants of the refuge were hostile towards outsiders like Kurumi. After much thought, he decided to take her to Fukushima, fearing she would be bullied here. However, Ren promised to take good care of Kurumi, considering that Hibiki's doctor father had made significant contributions to the refuge. Shortly thereafter, the refugee's founder was carried in, with an obvious wound from a zombie bite. It seemed she had been attacked while working outside. Experienced in this matter, Hibiki instructed everyone to tie her up and hurriedly went out. He found the zombie on a lawn and skillfully dealt with it. Knowing she was about to turn into a zombie, the founder instructed her son Ren to kill her quickly. However, Ren and the other residents had lived a long time in this isolated place, unaware of the dangers of zombies. They hesitated to act. Before long, the founder turned into a zombie in front of everyone. Fortunately, Hibiki returned in time and swiftly put her out of her misery. Hibiki had done everyone a great favor, but they were not grateful. They even thought his action was brutal and wanted to drive him away. But Ren knew Hibiki's actions were correct. He sincerely thanked Hibiki and, as the new leader here, called for everyone to live in harmony with Hibiki and his group. Seeing this, Hibiki decided not to risk taking Kurumi on his journey. He entrusted her to Ren, believing he was not a bad person. Before leaving, Hibiki visited Kurumi again. He introduced himself as if it was their first meeting, talked about their meeting and falling in love, as well as their respective dreams. Finally, he asked if Kurumi remembered their promise, but Kurumi still had no recollection. Hibiki had to suppress his sadness and reluctantly leave the room. He ran into his father at the door but passed by him without a word. His father, probably shocked, collapsed again due to his illness. Hibiki embarked on his journey to Fukushima to find the cure, bidding farewell to Yuzuki and her mother. Meanwhile, Kurumi sat on her bed, inexplicably shedding tears. Perhaps it was the invisible bond between lovers. Yohei and Hiragi, along with Hiro and a young boy, ventured towards the refuge under the guidance of Kawata. They encountered numerous zombie attacks along the way, but managed to solve all of them with ease. On the way, they passed by a sealed passageway, which intrigued the curious boy. But Yohei stopped him from entering. Unknown to them, a terrifying scene was unfolding within the passage. After a while, the group led by Kawata reached the Hope Home refuge. Despite their calls, no one came to open the door for them, as the refuge had a new rule not to accept any new survivors, unless they were relatives of the original inhabitants. Eventually, they were admitted into the refuge after Yuzuki's mother falsely claimed that the group were her relatives. Upon reuniting and relishing delicious food, the group was overjoyed. However, Kuwata kept their mission in mind, deciding to familiarize himself with the refugees' layout and gather information for their upcoming raid. They soon learned from Yuzuki's mother that Hibiki had gone to Fukushima alone to search for a cure for Kurumi, which surprised everyone. Hiragi looked particularly crestfallen. What baffled them the most was the ignorance of the people inside the refuge towards the zombie-ridden outside world. Instead, the refugees' caretaker told them they don't need to feel sorry for themselves, and people here don't care about the hardships they had faced outside. As long as everyone is fed, it's enough. After a harsh reprimand and being asked to leave the refuge, Hiro felt that their previous struggle for survival was pointless. Hiragi felt the same, and coupled with the news about Hibiki, she too felt desperate. The two lonely individuals became each other's solace and ended up performing some smelly hormone yoga. But they weren't the only ones feeling lonely. Yohei yearned for a warm home too, but he couldn't find a right woman to wrestle his muscles with. The next day, the mysterious man who had previously appeared in the passageway returned. He opened the refuge's protective barrier and let another zombie in. This zombie happened upon a pregnant woman who was out for a walk. Luckily, Hiragi saved her pregnant life just in time, but the woman's arm was still bitten. The injured woman was quickly brought to the hall. Upon seeing her, Ren swiftly took out an euthanasia syringe in accordance with the refuge's protocol. The woman and her husband pleaded desperately to let their child be born, but Ren disagreed due to the risk of the child being infected and the threat it could pose to the delivering doctor. Kurumi saw this and volunteered to help, stating that she was a doctor who had already been infected with the zombie virus, hence not afraid of further infection. Hiragi also decided to stay and help. Miraculously, the child was born without infection, allowing the woman to close her eyes in peace. When she woke up, she had turned into a mindless zombie. Hiragi drew a knife and, fighting back sorrow, put her out of her misery. The mysterious man, having just caused trouble at the refuge, headed towards the island. At this point, only Sota and Yoon remained on the island. Unbeknownst to them, danger was about to strike. The mysterious man released a horde of zombies from the previous corridor. Sota and Yoon sensed something was wrong and quickly retreated into a cabin. However, the zombies, seemingly under someone's command, pursued them relentlessly. Eventually, the duo was cornered in a courtyard with no room to retreat. Their only option was to lock the iron gate. Soon, the area outside was filled with zombies. Yoon knew they were doomed, either by starvation or being bitten by zombies breaking through the gate. Sota understood how valuable Yoon, a doctor, was in this zombie apocalypse. Despite her protests, Sota swiftly cut his hand and kicked open the gate. The flowing blood attracted all the zombies at the entrance. Sota was instantly surrounded, but his sacrifice was not in vain, as Yoon managed to escape. Inside the refuge, Kurumi and Hiragi successfully revived the baby. However, they didn't receive any thanks from the original occupants. Instead, they were surrounded, as the inhabitants had found out about Kurumi's infection. For safety, they decided to expel Kurumi from the refuge. But the refugees' new leader, Ren, intervened, explaining that Kurumi was infected but hadn't turned into a zombie. This only infuriated the crowd further. The leading caretaker questioned Ren, arguing that even if she hadn't turned, as an outsider, she had no right to stay because of the refugees' new rules. No survivors except residents' relatives were allowed. Hesitant, Ren announced in front of everyone that Kurumi was his fiancée, thus she could stay. This left the crowd speechless. Back on the island, Sota, besieged by zombies, was not dead yet. He lay gasping for breath on the ground. Suddenly, a blurry figure appeared in his vision. It's the unknown man wearing black boots and a leather coat. Poor Sota didn't even have a chance to struggle before the unknown man fatally stabbed him. The scene shifted to the unknown man in black boots, angrily destroying the tombstone of June, who had died to the stab in the first season, as if harboring a deep hatred for him. Back in the refuge, Kurumi was very grateful to Ren for accommodating her and felt a sense of comfort and safety. She volunteered to provide medical services to everyone as a doctor. On the other side, since her intimate night with Hiro, Hiragi felt somewhat regretful and sought him out to clarify that it was a momentary impulse. However, Hiro was even more firm, acting as if nothing had happened. Word of the zombie breach on the island finally reached the crowd in the refuge. Everyone was worried as no survivors had been found yet, and the whereabouts of Yoon and Sota, who were left on the island, were unknown. This made Yohei and the others realize the dangers outside, strengthening their determination to stay in the refuge. However, Hiragi and Hiro were certain that the zombies on the island were deliberately arranged by someone. Actually, staying in the refuge was not entirely safe and worry-free. There was a shortage of water, and the team that went out to scavenge for supplies had suffered some losses. They urgently needed to add 2 more members to the team. Upon hearing this news, the refugees' original inhabitants became agitated. They argued that the scavenger team couldn't always recruit from their group. The muscular newcomers like Yohei should also contribute. The young boy was unhappy upon hearing this. Every time they went out, it was their leader Hibiki who personally led the way. He challenged Ren, doubting that he had even killed a single zombie. Ren was left speechless by his accusation. The young boy didn't stop there. He questioned how Ren could lead everyone to survival when he didn't even understand the outside world. Yohei also sensed the crisis, worried that he and his group might be driven out, so he prepared to contribute labor within the refuge, even going so far as to tie a tie around his neck, claiming that work should look like work. He seemed very invested in his role as a surrogate father of Yuzuki, but the work he didn't seem like a white-collar job. On his first day of work, he even lost his tie. Ren was affected by what the young boy said about leadership during the day. He was introverted by nature, not good at expressing himself, and kept everything to himself. Kurumi noticed his struggle. She took the initiative to advise him, and indeed, she was starting to act as if she were Ren's fiancée. Luckily, Ren decisively stopped her because he always remembered Hibiki's entrustment. One day, Hiragi and Hiro went out on a scavenging mission, planning to investigate the truth about the zombie invasion on the island. As they passed a corridor, they heard a noise inside. Just as they were about to investigate, Kawada suddenly appeared and interrupted them. It turned out that he was also looking for the truth about the death of his sexy teammate. After that, the matter was dropped and they missed the truth. Now they were spotted by the mysterious man. Undoubtedly, they fell into the man's trap. Before long, Hiragi disappeared, and Hiro was ambushed and knocked unconscious. When he awoke, he found himself tied up in a wooden cabin, unable to move freely. Outside, there were quite a few zombies baring their teeth and claws. Due to the water shortage in the refuge, rationing had started. Only 1 bottle of water per person, no more. When the caretaker was counting the bottled water and found one missing, he assumed that Yuzuki had taken more. The young boy, not pleased, angrily pushed the caretaker to the ground. This brought trouble, as stealing water and applying violence were unforgivable. The caretaker had long wanted to drive them out, and now had a reason. Seeing this, Yohei fell to his knees, apologizing profusely. After a lot of effort, the situation was finally pacified. However, Yuzuki was not pleased. She was reluctant to apologize because she hadn't done anything wrong. Besides, Yohei was only pretending to be her father. There was no need for him to go to such lengths. Their argument was overheard by the caretaker, who discovered their fake familial relationship. He immediately reported to Ren, preparing to expel them. Ren had set the rule that the refuge should not accept outsiders who were not family members, so now he couldn't argue against it. Returning back, Yuzuki was still angry. Yohei tried to soothe her. Apologizing was all he could do. He thought he had done his best, but Yuzuki only got angrier. The father figure in her mind was not one who just apologized, but one who would protect everyone. This hit Yohei hard. Late at night, Kurumi came to find Ren alone. Seeing him hard at work, she couldn't help but lose herself. However, she hadn't forgotten she was prepared to plead for Yohei and his group. She didn't want them to leave. Kurumi was also in pain. News of her being infected with the zombie virus had spread. Even though she was a doctor, the residents were scared and always avoided her. What puzzled Kurumi the most was Ren's subtle alienation. Hibiki's father seemed to see through it all. He was one of the few in the refuge who did not ostracize Kurumi. He advised her that people do not only see what's in front of them, they don't know how much sweat has been shed behind the scenes. As long as she did her best, it would be enough. This comforted Kurumi a lot. The scene shifts to the mysterious man starting to stir trouble again, releasing another zombie into the refuge. Meanwhile, Yuzuki was in a warehouse, seemingly looking for something. Suddenly, she heard the roar of a zombie and ran away in panic. In the chaos, she was knocked over by a pipe. Luckily, she was found quickly. Upon arrival, Yuzuki's mother was screaming in agony. On the side, the caretaker was continually pressuring Ren, wanting to drive out Yohei and his group because the water resources were becoming more scarce. At this time, Kurumi stepped in to mediate, saying Ren often worked late into the night trying to solve the water problem. Her words left the caretaker speechless. At this time, Yuzuki, covered in blood, was carried in. Kurumi suggested an immediate blood transfusion, but the caretaker interfered again, stating that their blood supply was limited and it shouldn't be used on outsiders. Yohei was worried about their blood types, saying if matched, he was willing to give all his blood if needed. Ren was deeply moved by this group of people who were not family by blood, but acted more like a family. He decided to use the stored blood, prioritizing saving lives. Suddenly, a terrifying zombie crawled in. The people here didn't have much combat experience and were scared out of their wet pants. Ren, remembering the young boy's questioning of his leadership, bravely fought the zombie. Eventually, with everyone's cooperation, the zombie was defeated. Ren was trying to grow to become a qualified leader despite being sensitive and introverted. After Kurumi's desperate rescue, Yuzuki finally was out of danger and woke up the next day. Kurumi found Yohei's lost tie in Yuzuki's pocket and realized that Yuzuki had encountered danger because she was helping him find his lost tie. After this incident, these end-of-the-world survivors became a real family. The trial for Yohei and others, who had faked their familial relationships to enter the refuge, finally arrived. Ren stated that the rules must be strictly enforced. Yohei seemed to understand his words. Before the final result was announced, he said he was willing to leave, but begged Ren to shelter the children. To everyone's surprise, Ren argued that family was not only defined by blood relations. Those who cry, rejoice, and get angry together, who care for and cherish each other, are the real family. People like Yohei's group, who behaved even more like a family than actual families, naturally should stay. This new family was grateful for his words, and even the residents had accepted Kurumi. However, the turmoil in the refuge hasn't settled yet. They still didn't know how the zombies got in, and the caretaker seemed to have many secrets hidden. But after this incident, Kurumi's affection for Ren had grown considerably. She did not hesitate to express her joy, leaving the shy Ren defenseless. Just as he was about to leave, Kurumi confronted him because she always felt that Ren was avoiding her because of the zombie virus she was carrying. She assured him that she regularly checks her blood and carries euthanasia drugs with her as a precaution. Ren could not bear it and tried to take the euthanasia drugs away from her. While they struggled, their actions appeared ambiguous. Seeing Ren's hesitation, Kurumi broke down in tears like a giant baby. Ren walked over, comforting her using his words first, but juicy tongue later. Just then, Hibiki, who had gone out to look for medicine, returned covered in blood. He happened to walk in on the scene of his girlfriend Kurumi kissing Ren. All three were stunned for a moment. Ren broke the silence, boldly confessing his hormone feelings for Kurumi. Perhaps due to a sudden surge of emotions, Hibiki fainted before he could react. Elsewhere, Hiro, who had been captured by the mysterious man, was still trapped in a wooden house. His hands were handcuffed and he was unable to run away. Seeing the zombies outside breaking the door and coming closer, someone suddenly appeared from behind and killed the zombies. Upon closer inspection, it was Hiragi who came to the rescue. She had also been knocked out and taken nearby by the mysterious man, but she was luckier as her handcuffs were broken, allowing her to escape. However, the handcuffs securely fastened Hiro to a pillar, rendering him unable to move. Despite many attempts, he couldn't break free. Hiro didn't want to drag Hiragi down and asked her to leave him and escape. But Hiragi chose to stay and protect him because they were companions, and she couldn't just abandon him. However, staying like this wasn't a solution. More zombies were coming at night, and the situation was getting more serious. In desperation, Hiro came up with an idea, asking Hiragi to cut off his handcuffed hands so they could escape together. Hiragi couldn't bring herself to do it, but Hiro was resolute. He picked up a cutter from the ground and cut his own hand. The injured Hibiki woke up from a nightmare to find Kurumi watching over him. He learned from her that she still couldn't remember anything and that she was there not because she cared, but because it was her duty as a doctor. This greatly disappointed Hibiki, who also felt guilty because he didn't find the medicine to cure Kurumi on his trip. After Kurumi left, Ren came to add salt to Hibiki's wounds, saying that Kurumi was already his fiancée and that he had liked her for a long time. Hibiki was furious and pushed him out the door, left alone to endure the pain. He quickly sought out his father, asking if there was any other way to restore Kurumi's memory. His father, who had a certain degree of research on the zombie virus, confirmed with certainty that Kurumi's memory might never be restored. Still, Hibiki was not willing to give up. He turned to Yohei and Yuzuki's mother to ask what exactly had happened during his absence. From them, he learned that Kurumi had stayed here as Ren's fiancée, but they seemed to be playing more than just pretending. Just then, the caretaker came to stir up trouble again, saying that a lot of food had gone missing from the warehouse last week, and even the spare keys were missing. Yohei's family, who were involved in the cleaning work, were the main suspects. Despite their vehement denials, the caretaker ignored them and forcibly searched their bodies. Hibiki could not stand by and protested, but Yohei, in order to stay here, had to endure it. Coincidentally, Hibiki overheard Ren talking outside the house about the missing food. It turned out that Ren had stolen it to give to someone else. He was even discussing whether to send out the doctor as well. The scene then changed to an old warehouse where several zombies were chained up and constantly screaming. The mysterious man appeared again, seeming to have Ren under his control. He stated that he needed more supplies. Ren, who seemed to be under the mysterious man's thumb, returned to the refuge's warehouse to continue stealing food. Unexpectedly, Kawata suddenly appeared with a gun, catching him red-handed. Meanwhile, Kurumi received a new survivor. It's the virus researcher, Yoon. Yoon was surprised to meet Kurumi here, but Kurumi had no recollection of her. Suddenly, a gunshot rang out. Everyone quickly came to the hall. It turned out that Kawata was interrogating Ren, asking if it was his accomplices who had attacked the island. Seeing Ren remaining silent, Kawata exposed that Ren had been stealing food and secretly communicating with the enemy. Ren had no choice but to admit that the group of mysterious people were the former members of the refuge, who had been expelled for their radical methods and became villains continuously threatening the refuge. They would return periodically to demand food, and Ren had no choice but to comply for the safety of the refuge, as they had no weapons to resist them. Although it seemed somewhat reasonable, Hibiki knew that Ren wasn't telling the whole truth. He questioned Ren about why he wanted to hand over Kurumi, who was a doctor. Ren firmly replied that it was their request, but he would never agree to it. Hibiki was even more furious after hearing this. He took the gun from Kawata and pointed it at Ren. Kurumi rushed to shield Ren with her sexy body, looking at Hibiki defiantly and stating that she trusted Ren. As a doctor, she also wanted to prevent any casualties. Hibiki had nothing to say and walked out of the hall. This incident did not undermine Ren's leadership, as his initial intention was to protect the people of the refuge. However, he felt a bit aggrieved. Fortunately, Kurumi appeared beside him in time and comforted him using her words first and muscles later. Hibiki saw this scene from a distance and was even more unhappy. To top it off, he received devastating news that his father's condition had deteriorated and he might not survive the night. So, Hibiki visited his father's room. After many years, the father and son finally had a calm conversation. His father told Hibiki that there were many ways to love, and it did not necessarily mean they had to be together. Just like himself, he had learned the truth about a criminal organization spreading the zombie virus years ago. He was blackmailed by them and didn't dare to contact Hibiki for fear of implicating him. After hearing this, most of Hibiki's resentment towards his father faded. He took his father's hand, and the father and son duo reconciled. But the good times didn't last long. As night fell, Hibiki's father eventually passed away. The next day, Kurumi came to comfort Hibiki and took the opportunity to ask about their past. Hibiki recounted the details of their journey from meeting to falling in love. It was only then that a hint of a smile could be seen on Hibiki's face. However, after listening, Kurumi was not particularly moved. She stubbornly believed that she had no past nor future and could only live in the present with Ren. After saying this, she took out the engagement ring Hibiki had given her, prepared to return it. Remembering what his father had said the night before, Hibiki accepted the ring, sincerely said he would always love her, and then turned and left. When he was out of Kurumi's sight, he couldn't help but burst into tears like a giant baby. Hibiki sat by the river for a long time, then threw the ring onto the ground, as if making a decision. Meanwhile, Ren had to shoulder the responsibilities of a refuge manager. He announced in front of everyone that he was preparing to negotiate with the villains again, intending to break free from their blackmail. He left with a lot of promises, but seemed somewhat cowardly when he actually saw the villains. Afterward, Ren returned to the refuge and happened to run into Hibiki, who was about to leave. As he was leaving, Hibiki gave his gun to Ren, entrusting him again to take care of Kurumi. Yohei and the young boy were walking around the refuge when they suddenly heard a strange noise. The boy went over to check it out, but Yohei shouted a warning and ran towards the boy to protect him. On the other side, Yoon was helping Kurumi with a blood test and happily told her that the zombie virus in her body was not worsening. However, Kurumi was still worried, saying that she sometimes felt dizzy. Yoon found this strange and asked Kurumi if she was aware that she was pregnant. Upon hearing this, Kurumi was stunned and didn't know what to do. She didn't even know who the father of the child could be. Just as Hibiki was leaving the refuge, he was stopped by Yuzuki's mother. She informed him that Yohei and the young boy were missing. They hastily searched everywhere and eventually found Yohei lying on the ground in an open area. He weakly pointed in a direction, and following his gesture, they saw a horrifying sight. Yuzuki's mother collapsed in shock. Not far away, the young boy's head was impaled on a spear, a grim scene of death. Yohei was rushed to the clinic, his life hanging in the balance. Everyone who saw the boy's body fell silent, and a sense of panic began to spread. Only Yuzuki's mother was emotional, expressing strong dissatisfaction towards Ren, the refugees' leader. The recurrence of such an incident meant that Ren's previous negotiation with the villains had failed. Everyone didn't want to continue suffering at the hands of these unidentified individuals and decided to leave the refuge. At this point, Hibiki stopped and warned that venturing out now would be even more dangerous, as he had just returned from Fukushima and had encountered zombies all along the way. His words made everyone hesitate. Then Hibiki suggested to Ren that what they needed to do now was to compromise with the villains, continue providing them with supplies in exchange for temporary safety. Kurumi appeared and agreed, thinking that Hibiki made sense. Ren, on the other hand, remained silent, only clenching his fists, feeling that Hibiki was overstepping his bounds. Fortunately, the disturbance was eventually quelled. Afterwards, Yoon suggested to the infected Kurumi that it would be better not to have the baby. As Ren happened to walk in from outside, he overheard the conversation about pregnancy. Kurumi didn't hide it and admitted she was pregnant. But because of her amnesia, she didn't know who the father of the child was. But Ren knew that the child's father was likely Hibiki. As Ren was leaving, he ran into Hibiki, who wanted to stay in the refuge. He was worried about Kurumi and Yuzuki. However, Ren refused and told him to leave immediately, lying that Kurumi was pregnant with his own child. Hibiki was shocked and hurt. He sat outside alone, saddened. Kurumi came over. She was also torn about whether or not to have the baby and was very much in need of support. However, Hibiki thought that the baby was Kurumi's and Ren's and didn't show much concern, which made Kurumi feel even worse. To add insult to injury, Yoon brought an abortion pill that night, hoping that Kurumi would terminate the pregnancy as soon as possible, because if the baby were born, it could potentially bring danger to those around them. She tried to persuade Kurumi in her capacity as a doctor, committed to ensuring everyone's safety. This left Kurumi feeling even more helpless. Meanwhile, Hibiki was still worrying about the safety of the refuge. He found Yuzuki and her mother and carefully asked about the previous situation. After learning that zombies frequently appeared in the refuge, he speculated that there might be a traitor working with the villains. Otherwise, it would be impossible for zombies to enter so easily. On the other side, Hiro, who had been captured by the villains and had his arm sawed off, finally escaped with Hiragi. They braved numerous challenges along the way, cutting down wave after wave of zombies. The two of them formed a deep bond. Hiro even made a promise to Hiragi, saying he would always protect her. Hibiki and the caretaker returned to the place where their former leader was killed. After a careful search, they finally found a clue. The back door used for transporting supplies was left open, and there was a pool of blood inside. Hibiki speculated that the zombies must have come out from here. After passing through the passage, they found it led to the wilderness. At the same time, the same messenger found the leader Ren and told him that the villains had once again extended an invitation for a final negotiation. Ren was hesitant at first, but decided to attend. However, to his surprise, upon reaching the destination, the messenger seemed to change his attitude, drawing a dagger and pointing it at Ren. Apparently, there were no villains to negotiate with. The messenger had tricked Ren out to seek revenge. Ren was puzzled and asked repeatedly, only to find out that Ren's mother had once refused to treat the messenger's sick child, which led to the child's unfortunate death. Because of that, the messenger had harbored resentment ever since, and had become the traitor and been secretly retaliating against the refuge. The zombies that had broken in several times before were indeed released by the messenger. After saying this, the messenger stabbed Ren. Luckily, the knife didn't hit any vital parts. Just as the messenger was about to strike again, Ren unexpectedly drew a gun and shot him dead on the spot. This scene was accidentally witnessed by Hibiki, who was out looking for clues. Ren pointed his gun at Hibiki, who was startled and tried to persuade Ren, promising to keep his secret. However, Ren, who had long been displeased with Hibiki, shot him without a word. A scuffle ensued between the two. During the fight, Hibiki questioned Ren's brutality, asking how he would face his own child, but Ren confessed that he had lied to Hibiki. Hibiki only then realized that he was the father of the child. Enraged, Hibiki threw Ren to the ground and repeatedly punched him. Ren, however, was obstinate. He held on to Hibiki, vowing never to let Hibiki and Kurumi be together unless he was killed. This provoked a murderous intent in Hibiki, who picked up a rod ready to strike deadly. But he suddenly remembered how Ren had taken Kurumi in. His compassion kicked in, and he not only spared Ren's life, but also helped him walk towards the refuge. Along the way, they inevitably encountered several waves of zombies. Despite being injured, Hibiki managed to fend them off one by one, continuing forward with Ren. Inside the refuge, Yohei couldn't escape his fate. After surgery due to severe injuries, he closed his eyes to meet his ancestor in the tomb. Beside him, Yuzuki was heartbroken because she fully accepted him as her father. Over at Kurumi's, she finally decided to bring her child into the world. She often dreamt about a family of 3 walking on the beach, leaving 3 sets of adorable footprints. She guessed that this was not just a dream, but perhaps her future. When it came to the idea of a family of 3, Kurumi instantly remembered her past aspirations with Hibiki. Memories with Hibiki flooded her mind, showing that her memory had finally returned. At that moment, noisy sounds came from outside the room. The survivors in the refuge were thrown into chaos, all huddled into one room. The villains had broken in. Among them was Yuzuki and her mother. However, the woman hid her daughter under a table. By nightfall, Hibiki and Ren finally returned to the refuge, only to find the front door tightly shut. No one responded to their calls, so they had to bring Ren in through the back door. However, when they entered the room, they were terrified by the sight before them. Everyone who had taken refuge in the room had been murdered, bodies scattered haphazardly across the floor. Only Kurumi and Yoon had been absent, narrowly escaping the massacre. Yuzuki's mother was not so fortunate. Yuzuki was crying non-stop for the death of her mother. Hibiki was helpless as Kurumi tried to save Yuzuki's mother. Ren looked on with a face of despair. After a long time, they managed to regain some composure. At this time, the villain's voice came over the radio again. Ren pleaded with them to stop, promising to meet any demands. Surprisingly, this time they didn't want supplies. They wanted the doctor from the refuge. Hibiki contemplated outside, preparing to find the villains and put an end to this. At this moment, Kurumi appeared again. However, Hibiki didn't ask about the baby's father, knowing that his journey could be perilous. Strangely, Kurumi, who had recovered her memory, didn't reveal anything to Hibiki. She simply looked at him, gently chiding him for his recklessness. She assured Hibiki that the villains had agreed to the trade and the refuge would be safe, like before. She didn't wait for Hibiki's response and continued to say that she had decided to have the baby. Regardless of the baby's gender, she would name the baby Future. No matter what the world becomes, they should never give up on the future. Hibiki placed his jacket over Kurumi and turned to leave. Watching Hibiki's retreating figure, Kurumi burst into tears. She then noticed the ring that Hibiki had dropped earlier, making her even more emotional. It turns out that Kurumi didn't acknowledge Hibiki because she had agreed to the villain's trade. She requested to sacrifice herself to protect the refuge and the baby in her womb. Having just recovered her memory and having to say goodbye to Hibiki again, Kurumi chose not to reveal her identity. The next day, when Hibiki woke up, he saw his jacket on the bed and sensed something was wrong. He searched everywhere but couldn't find Kurumi. He ran to confront Ren, only to learn that Kurumi had been taken by the villains. Hibiki didn't say a word after hearing this. He packed all his belongings and walked out of the refuge, preparing to set out to find Kurumi again. At that moment, someone called out to Hibiki. It was Yuzuki. She wanted to go with him. In just a few days, she had lost both her father and mother. Yuzuki seemed to have grown up overnight. Hibiki didn't reject her. He took Yuzuki's hand and resolutely walked towards the outside. They had traveled through town after town. Apart from ubiquitous zombies and the organization's X mark left by the villains, there were no other clues. Fast forward 10 months, an alarm shattered the silence. 2 zombies were hungrily eyeing a newbie driver hidden inside a car. Hibiki and Yuzuki rushed to eliminate the zombies. However, the alarm was still buzzing non-stop, attracting more zombies from the surroundings. Hibiki prompted the newbie driver to evacuate quickly, but the boy named Shinji insisted on retrieving the supplies in the car. But the delay resulted in the group getting surrounded by the gathering zombies. They managed to rescue Shinji from a zombie horde, broke through the zombie encirclement, and escaped into a yard. They then blocked the only entrance for their temporary safety. However, the temporary fence of the yard collapsed. Unexpectedly, Hibiki was knocked down, and to make matters worse, several zombies broke in. At this critical moment, a man suddenly appeared, quickly eliminating the zombies. It turned out to be Kawata, whose sexy teammate was killed by the X organization. He had also been searching for revenge all these years. Compared to Hibiki's kindness, Kawata was much tougher. He demanded all the supplies from Shinji. Hibiki naturally refused, claiming it was robbery, but Kawata advised him not to sympathize with anyone if he wanted to survive in the apocalypse. While they were arguing, a group of armed personnel in white lab coats appeared outside the yard. After shooting down the scattered zombies, they started cleaning up the bodies. Kawata speculated if they might be the villains from the X organization. Though he meant nothing by it, Yuzuki took it to heart. Her parents were also killed by the mysterious organization. She couldn't help but rush forward. Shinji tried to stop her but was shot down by one of the white-coated people. Hibiki rushed up to explain, followed by 2 survivors who testified that they had just witnessed Hibiki's rescue of Shinji. After listening, the white-coated soldiers lowered their guard, apologized for their hasty shooting, and offered to take the injured person back to their headquarters for treatment. Before Hibiki could even question, the soldiers had already lifted the injured person onto their vehicle. Unable to do much, Hibiki and Yuzuki reluctantly got into the vehicle. Seeing this, the hidden Kawata cursed idiots under his breath, took Shinji's supplies and walked away. 2 cars slowly drove towards the base of the soldiers in white. This place, far from the city center, nestled against mountains and near water, was one of the few refuges in this apocalyptic world. Hibiki and his party had just arrived when a welcoming committee came out to greet them and arrange for Shinji to receive medical treatment. Among them, the female survivor, Miyagi, was curious about what this place was. The leading steward told them they were a part of a religious group called the Emblem of Light. Besides their armed forces, there were over 100 people living here, but Hibiki didn't care about that. He just wanted to find the villain's organization and save his girlfriend. So he began to ask for information. Unexpectedly, the other party had heard of the X organization, though they didn't know much about it. Afterward, he invited everyone to dine. In the zombie apocalypse, it was surprising to see such good food. Everyone was curious about what kind of meat was in the dishes. The steward didn't answer, only stating it was the church's staple food, containing all the nutrients required by the human body. The male survivor was carefree, not only enjoying himself, but also feeding Miyagi a bite. Hibiki quietly cautioned Yuzuki to only eat the vegetables and avoid the meat. After a pleasant meal, the newcomers witnessed the church's bi-monthly worship ceremony, which was quite different from the outside world. With the devout reception of the believers, the cult leader slowly stepped onto the stage, his gaze sharp and full of charisma. After reaching the stage, he began to unwrap the bandage on his left arm, revealing several grotesque scars. Soon, someone brought forth a zombie with its hands and feet bound. Under everyone's gaze, the cult leader extended his scarred arm towards the zombie, which bit down hard. The believers all revealed expressions of both horror and worship. Hibiki was also stunned. The leader's neck veins bulged momentarily, then subsided at a fast speed. Seeing that the leader did not turn into a zombie, all the believers exclaimed for the miracle. The newcomers were utterly astonished. The scars on the leader's hand were obviously from multiple zombie bites, but why hadn't he mutated? As they were discussing this, a believer came over with a message. The leader wanted to see Hibiki and Yuzuki. At this point, he was bandaging his wound, seemingly unfazed by the whole ordeal. What baffled Hibiki was that the leader seemed to read people's minds. He knew Hibiki had come here looking for his girlfriend. Feeling uncomfortable having his secret exposed, Hibiki took Yuzuki and left the room. His intuition told him that the leader was most likely faking his divine powers, and perhaps had ulterior motives. Taking advantage of the night, Hibiki stealthily came to the church, feeling that there must be secrets buried here. After searching for a while, he found nothing unusual. Just then, several patrolling believers walked in. Hibiki quietly hid and followed them into a secret corridor. Unexpectedly, at the end, there was a massive processing plant. Hibiki peeked in to get a better look, his face turning pale. He saw zombies being skillfully chopped into pieces by the workers. No doubt the meat they ate during the day came from here. At the same time, Yuzuki and the others were chatting in their room. The male survivor who had eaten the most meat during the day suddenly began to tremble before collapsing motionless on the floor. The group rushed to his aid only to find that he had turned into a pale-eyed zombie. They recoiled in fear. Miyagi, who seemed frail, was actually incredibly fierce. She dealt with the zombie with a few blows. However, when Hibiki rushed back, she had returned to her innocent girl demeanor. Not long after, a group of believers also arrived at the room. They seemed unsurprised by the male survivor's transformation. Hibiki sensed something was wrong and accused them of causing this and feeding them the zombie meat. The others no longer denied it, admitting that it was a rule set by their cult leader. Outraged, Hibiki led everyone to the processing plant just as the leader was inspecting it. He couldn't help but confront the leader, questioning why they would do such a thing. The leader seemed unfazed, arguing that when spiritual sustenance alone was insufficient, humans needed to intake enough nutritional elements to survive. Hibiki couldn't accept that, especially since the zombie meat carried the virus. The leader explained that this was a selection process. Not everyone who ate the meat would turn into a zombie. Miyagi, who also took the meat, was an example. To survive in this world, one must at least have some immunity to the zombie virus. All the believers in the church were those who had passed this selection. He then said that Yuzuki, being a child, could stay with Miyagi, who had passed the test. However, Hibiki would have to pass the test too, or he would have to leave immediately. Yuzuki tried to persuade Hibiki not to be impulsive, saying they could leave together if necessary. But the leader kept tempting him, claiming he could help Hibiki find his girlfriend. This swayed Hibiki, who without hesitation swallowed a piece of zombie meat. He didn't care if he would be infected because his only thought was to find his girlfriend with the leader's help. Meanwhile, Kawata was persistently searching for the X organization and finally made some progress. As he passed by a manor, he found several recently deceased zombies marked with the organization's X symbol. Just as he was about to investigate further, a tall figure suddenly appeared. Recognizing the scar on the man's face, Kawata identified him as June, who was supposed to be dead, but still alive, and had joined the X organization. It turns out the unknown man in black boots who destroyed June's tombstone previously was June himself. Finally coming face to face with the enemy who killed his sexy teammate, Kawata drew his sword and began to fight. The two were evenly matched, but after a while, June gradually began to falter and took advantage of a lapse to flee. Kawata gave chase, following his smell into a room full of zombies. Somehow, June had circled back outside and locked the door from there. In the room, Kawata was left alone with a horde of hungry zombies. The room echoed with cries of terror and the sound of clashing metal, while June smelled a wildflower outside, undisturbed by the chaos within. Once the room fell silent, he walked to the front door. Through the window, he saw a floor covered with zombies and a barely conscious Kawata. June unlocked the door and carried the unconscious Kawata outside, then took him to an abandoned factory. After a while, Kawata woke up, surprised to find that this was the lair of the X organization, surrounded by many members. At this moment, a woman in tight clothing appeared to flex her tight figure. Looking up, Kawata saw it was Kurumi, Hibiki's long-sought-after girlfriend. Over at Hibiki's, he took the zombie meat and half a day passed without any abnormality in his body, showing that he passed the test. But Hibiki didn't feel any relief. He was only concerned about when the leader would help him find his girlfriend. But the leader was unhurried, saying that they had to plan for the long term. Just as Hibiki was about to flare up, a believer rushed in to report that the fugitive who had destroyed the processing plant a few days ago had been caught. Hibiki was curious and followed the crowd to check the commotion. But when he saw the fugitive's face, he was completely unsettled. It was his friend Hiro who had been missing for several months. Hibiki knew that Hiro was a former police officer and wouldn't tolerate the processing of zombie meat, so it was natural for him to want to destroy the factory. But to the other believers, this was like cutting off their food supply, so they hated Hiro. Some even threw stones at him. Yuzuki blocked them with her body. But the bespectacled man who threw the stone begged for forgiveness, as if he had made a terrible mistake, even volunteering to become Yuzuki's Mary Sue. The other believers suddenly became incredibly sincere, repeating Mary Sue. Hibiki and others were confused, wondering what Mary Sue meant. But he didn't have time to worry about that. He turned to find the leader, asking him to let Hiro go. The leader refused, saying he could only meet Hiro once. Hibiki wanted to ask about Mary Sue, but the leader played coy, saying it was an honor for every believer. This answer made the group even more confused. They all came together, so why was Yuzuki chosen? Shinji suddenly realized that there were a lot of people here, but no children could be seen. So where had they all gone? Yuzuki also remembered that when the ceremony was held, everyone looked at her strangely. To figure it out, Hibiki planned to ask Hiro when he had the opportunity to see him. He even brought a piece of zombie meat. As long as Hiro ate it, he could pass the church test and might regain his freedom. Hiro didn't expect Hibiki to collude with the church. His attitude became cold. He didn't even want to talk, and certainly wouldn't help him solve the mystery of Mary Sue. Hibiki didn't expect to be snubbed and could only leave. As he walked through the corridor, he noticed someone outside the room reflecting light towards him with a mirror. Driven by curiosity, he followed the source of the light to find his long-lost friend, Hiragi. When they had parted ways, she and Hiro had been together. Now that Hiro had been captured, Hiragi couldn't help but come to his rescue. Hibiki thought this was too risky and decided to find a way to earn Hiro the leader's forgiveness instead. When Hiragi heard this, her face changed. She was disappointed that Hibiki, who used to be brave and righteous, had become so weak. She decided to find others to rescue Hiro, while Hibiki fell into deep thought. He didn't know whether it was right or wrong for him to give up his principles to find his beloved woman. Just as he was pondering like a pig, Miyagi came running to announce that Yuzuki had disappeared. Hibiki ran into the dining room. It was very strange. The little girl had been eating here just a moment ago and never returned after going to the bathroom. Recalling the mention of Mary Sue in the morning, Hibiki had a bad feeling. He split up with Miyagi and others to look for Yuzuki. In a corridor, Hibiki saw two believers carrying Yuzuki's backpack. He rushed to question them, but they stubbornly refused to reveal anything. Suddenly, a figure appeared from the side. It was Miyagi. Hibiki was hesitant to fight women, but Miyagi had no such reservations. With a few heavy punches, she knocked one of the believers unconscious. The remaining female believer, terrified like a chicken, offered to lead them to Yuzuki. Miyagi seized the opportunity and started to act coyly. Not long after, the female believer led them to a room at the end of the hallway. Unable to contain his anxiety, Hibiki opened the door to find several missing children, including Yuzuki. The steward quickly explained that the underage children were the primary focus of the church's protection. Unlike adults, they could quickly accept new values, such as the idea of cohabitation between humans and zombies. Moreover, after observing for a few days, the leader believed Yuzuki was a strong child, hoping she could stay and become the new bishop. Although Yuzuki was reluctant, Hibiki knew he would eventually leave the church and continue his adventures. Instead of letting Yuzuki face unknown dangers, it might be a better choice for her to stay here. But he still had one question in his mind. What exactly was this so-called Mary Sue? When he found out Hiro still refused to answer, he had to ask the prisoner next door. Surprisingly, as soon as the prisoner heard the words, he dropped to his knees and started crying loudly. Just then, a group of fully armed believers walked in, taking Hiro and the prisoner next door out of the cell, saying it was time for the Mary Sue ceremony. Meanwhile, the children in the nursery were enjoying their lunch. 2 patties were served on their plates. Even though Yuzuki knew these weren't made from zombie flesh, she still had no appetite. Seeing this, the follower in charge of looking after Yuzuki felt guilty and suggested she attend the Mary Sue ceremony. With a complicated look on her face, she then left the room. When she arrived at the church hall, the other followers had already gathered, preparing for the Mary Sue ceremony. After sharing her thoughts, the followers clapped and cheered in agreement. They saw participating in the Mary Sue ceremony as an extraordinary honor. At the command, she revealed a devout smile, allowing a black bag to be placed over her head. The few watching from the audience were dumbfounded, wondering if this ceremony was about choking someone to death. At this point, the cult leader stepped in to explain that Mary Sue is a children's meal. Adult followers can eat the zombie flesh, but the children need fresh flesh. To incorporate oneself into the new generation is the ultimate honor for every follower. At this time, Yuzuki also noticed something strange about the food, as it contained a metal tooth. She recalled it was from the bespectacled man that morning who volunteered for the Mary Sue ceremony and shuddered with disgust. Hibiki also came to understand the church's madness, realizing that his previous submission wouldn't garner any assistance. Seeing that Hiro was about to become the next Mary Sue, he quickly grabbed a gun from a follower. After firing several shots, he cut Hiro's ropes. Just then, Hiragi rushed into the church with a helper. The two sides confronted each other. Hibiki quickly aimed his gun at the cult leader, forcing all followers to drop their weapons. However, the leader looked calm, showing no fear of death, which greatly boosted the followers' confidence. After shouting that the leader was immortal, they started fighting with Hiro and the others, paying no mind to the leader who was still at gunpoint. Hibiki was torn. After all, the leader was a being who had been bitten by a zombie but showed no signs of infection. It would be a shame if he died just like that. But then, he was hit from behind and fell unconscious. When he woke up, he found Hiro, Hiragi, and others had been detained. Hiragi's helper, who turned out to be the senior researcher Yoon. Upon hearing that the cult leader was immune to the zombie virus, she became interested and came along with Hiragi. Luckily, Yuzuki and Miyagi were not implicated. However, rescuing Hibiki with their power alone seemed pretty difficult for them. Little did they know, the X-organization where June belongs had long set their eyes on this place. At this moment, they quickly reached the main building of the church and began to clear out guards and survivors easily like smashing pieces of shit. One of the individuals in black arrived at Miyagi's room. Unexpectedly, Miyagi's combat skills were far more formidable than anticipated, and she fought fiercely with the intruder. Coupled with the assistance of Yuzuki and others, they quickly subdued the man in black. Miyagi did not forget to deliver the finishing blow until he was unconscious. Even though they were victorious, the situation in the church was grim. The cult leader gathered his remaining forces in the hall and used the captive black-clothed man as a hostage, hoping to make the X organization surrender. However, the organization was even more ruthless, threatening to harm the children, whom the church valued most. The members of the X organization were ruthless. This terrified the cult leader, who agreed to surrender all the weapons and vegetables in the church. After the men in black had left to load the truck, Miyagi and Shinji hurried to the jail to free Hibiki and others. Learning that the troublemakers were from the same organization that had kidnapped his girlfriend, Hibiki was filled with determination. He would not let this opportunity slip away. Fortunately, the organization had not left the church. Hibiki took the chance to knock out Shinji of the last truck and infiltrated the convoy. But little did he know, the car had not traveled far before it was forcibly stopped. The one who appeared was Kuwata, who had been captured earlier. Hibiki was utterly puzzled as to why Kuwata had joined the organization. The two engaged in wrestling their muscles. Kuwata was much stronger, and after a few exchanges, he slashed Hibiki with a knife and kicked him down a slope. Poor Hibiki was almost broken to pieces. To make matters worse, a few zombies were approaching from a short distance away. He tried to get up and run for his shitty life, but he had no strength left. Fortunately, his friend Hiro arrived just in time and quickly dealt with the zombies. However, Hibiki still had to rescue his girlfriend from the X organization. Hiro tried to bring him back to reality, pointing out that he was having difficulty even walking, let alone rescuing any sexy girls. Hibiki collapsed to the ground, feeling useless. He had finally found a clue about Kurumi, yet he could do nothing but watch her slip away. Eventually, with Hiro's support, he decided to return to the church first and plan his next move. Unexpectedly, as the mysterious organization was leaving with the children, Yuzuki also secretly got on the truck. Shinji, who was with her, took the opportunity to take out the guard in the vehicle. The two of them sat in the truck and luckily arrived at the base of the X organization. They avoided the guards and made their way along the corridor, soon reaching an underground room. This room was filled with many bodies, and they had no idea what the organization was using them for. In the innermost room laid a sick old man. As they were about to approach him, he suddenly sat up and shot Shinji. The men in black rushed over upon hearing the noise. Yuzuki panicked. She picked up a weapon and started shooting. The people outside seemed to be wary and did not shoot back. However, the ammunition eventually ran out, and the little girl was quickly subdued. The man was about to kill her when a woman in black, Kurumi, walked in and stopped him. It's then revealed that the old man in the bed was the boss of the mysterious organization. Now he needed Kurumi, who knows medicine, to save his life. As expected, the boss's condition worsened after a while. Kurumi immediately took out some special medicine. After several injections, the boss's condition stabilized. But Yuzuki's shooting spree had damaged many medicines. Kurumi estimated that the boss might not survive for 2 more days. The men in black at the scene became frantic. Nobody knew where else to find the special medication. At that moment, the captured Shinji revealed that he knew of a research institute storing a good amount of the medicine. If they wanted its location, they needed to release him and the children, including Yuzuki. Just as the headband-wearing man was preparing to torture him for the information, the boss ordered them to do as he said. After the location was revealed, only Shinji was released. It was the final act of mercy from these villains, a result fought for by Kurumi. As they were about to part ways, she warned Shinji not to reveal her whereabouts to Hibiki, or they would kill the children. When Shinji returned to the church, the cult leader was furious. Yuzuki was his most valued successor, and he had to rescue her at all costs. After learning of the situation, Hibiki came up with a plan. Go to the research institute and get the medicine first, then trade it for Yuzuki. The cult leader sighed, knowing that they were short-handed and outgunned, and this was the only way. Soon, Hibiki had packed his bags and set off with the others. Fortunately, they arrived at the research institute ahead of the X organization. The place was teeming with zombies. Every few steps, they encountered a horde. The group had no time to detour and had to clear the zombies as they moved forward. Finally, they found the urgently needed medicine in the pharmacy on the top floor. Just then, gunfire erupted from outside. The X organization had arrived, and they were all ferociously aggressive, firing at any living thing they saw. Hibiki and his group had to scatter and fight them off one by one. After a fierce battle, they managed to escape the institute, but ahead, two people awaited. They were Jun and Kawata, who were also after the medicine. The two sides clashed again, and in the confrontation, Jun was accidentally stabbed. In a critical moment, Hiro jumped in front of Hibiki, getting fatally pierced by the blade. Jun and Kawata snatched the medicine and left immediately. Hiro was now breathing his last, his main concern being Hiragi, who was waiting for his return. Not long after, he fell, his breath extinguishing. Hibiki was heartbroken and cried out, but he soon fell unconscious due to his severe injuries. Meanwhile, Kurumi, who was waiting for the medicine, ran up to check on them. Seeing Hiro's lifeless body stirred a bitter feeling in her heart. She then turned to the unconscious Hibiki, her face full of concern. She knew the brutality of the X organization and didn't want Hibiki to get hurt. Yoon then urged her to escape while she could. Kurumi managed a bitter smile, explaining that everything she did was for the child. It turns out she had given birth to Hibiki's child a few months ago. The X organization was from another country, here to collect zombie samples. Once the mission was completed, they could return to a country not afflicted by the zombie virus. The boss had promised Kurumi that when he left, he would take her child with him, ensuring a healthy, growing environment. As Hibiki was about to wake up, Kurumi put on a stern face, claiming she had moved on and asked Hibiki to stop looking for her. She then left without looking back. What she left behind was a storm of devastation for Hibiki. Not only did they fail the mission and lose Hiro, but his long-held beliefs were also shattered. Hibiki silently went to the church hall, his eyes dead and empty. Meanwhile, outside the church, Shinji pulled out a small booklet. This was a vaccine injection list he had found while looking for medicine at the research institute. The name of the cult leader was prominently written within. It turned out that the reason he wasn't infected after being bitten by a zombie was due to the vaccine. Unfortunately, it was only a semi-finished product and could not fully immunize against the zombie virus. Over time, the cult leader's symptoms of infection became more obvious, and he was at risk of losing control at any moment. Knowing he was about to lose everything, he happened to see Hibiki at the church. The two sat together and had a heart-to-heart. It's then revealed that the cult leader once joined a zombie vaccine injection experiment due to a lack of money. But when he returned home, he found his daughter had turned into a zombie. Strangely enough, she looked very similar to Yuzuki, which was why he had a soft spot for her. He didn't want to live alone, but after being bitten by his zombie daughter, he didn't turn into a zombie. So he created the church, aiming to protect these unfortunate children. The pain he experienced in his life was no less than what Hibiki had gone through, which greatly moved Hibiki and reignited his fighting spirit. At this moment, a group of followers suddenly burst in. They also knew the truth about why the cult leader didn't turn into a zombie. He was not the so-called deity they believed in. Their faith collapsed instantaneously, and they decided to eliminate the leader. Hibiki stopped them, saying if it weren't for the leader's faith and protection over the years, they couldn't have survived until today. His words made the followers decide to detain the cult leader for now. Hibiki had already packed his gear, planning to return to the X organization's base. Even if Kurumi had changed her heart, he wanted to face it head-on. Besides Shinji and Yoon, Miyagi also wanted to join. Hiragi, due to her injuries, could only send her blessings. Seeing Hibiki determined to venture into the dangerous lair, Yoon had no choice but to reveal Kurumi's concerns. She also reminded Hibiki that even if they saved her, Kurumi probably wouldn't live long, as she was also infected. Shinji wondered how Kurumi had survived so long. Yoon guessed that she must have also been injected with the zombie vaccine, but unfortunately she would eventually be infected. Yoon was very clear about its efficacy because she had participated in its development. The real inventor of the vaccine was the genius Dr. Shuto. Hearing this name, Shinji's face turned ugly, and he immediately terminated the topic. At this time, Hibiki had successfully scouted the area, but there wasn't a single guard on the outskirts of the X organization. They only saw weapons scattered everywhere, and occasionally a few zombies blocked their path, which they quickly dispatched. But when Hibiki arrived at the innermost ward, he still hadn't found his girlfriend Kurumi. He only saw June, barely alive on a hospital bed. He was just a step too late. It turns out that just half a day ago, Kurumi successfully brought back the medication. The quantity was enough to extend the boss's life for a few months. The headband man couldn't stand it anymore. The task of collecting zombie specimens was long finished. He wanted to force the boss to contact the headquarters to pick everyone up. However, June was still loyal to the boss and immediately objected. The atmosphere became tense. Eventually, it was the headband man who gave in first. But he didn't admit defeat. Instead, he was preparing a scheme. He knew that Kuwata had infiltrated the X organization to find the culprit who killed his beloved teammate. The headband man whispered a few words into Kuwata's ear and then went to the bedridden boss again, trying to force him to reveal how to contact the headquarters. June naturally wouldn't allow this, so a fight broke out between the two. Kuwata, who was hiding in the shadows, suddenly drew his knife and stabbed June, causing him to fall to the ground. With June out of the way, the headband man was able to force the boss to reveal the encrypted channel to contact the headquarters. A time and location were quickly provided over the radio, the official rendezvous point for everyone to leave. The headband man was ecstatic and led his men to drive there, leaving behind the bedridden boss and the barely alive June. Kurumi didn't go with them because she needed to treat her injuries. Unexpectedly, the boss had deceived everyone. He had actually cut ties with the headquarters a long time ago. The responses he usually received were pre-recorded messages. The headband man and his men would soon discover they had been played. When they did, everyone would die in their rage. The boss knew that his traitorous subordinates would be back soon, and it wouldn't end well. So he urged everyone to leave quickly, but Kurumi couldn't abandon the imprisoned children and wanted to take them with her. The boss pulled out his weapon and aimed it at her. Kuwata quickly covered for Kurumi and Yuzuki to escape. But as soon as they left, Yoon arrived at the clinic and was shot down by the boss. Hibiki arrived too late to rescue her. Shinji told him to go find Kurumi and leave the rest to him. They never expected the base to be much larger than they had imagined. After several big loops, they finally found Kurumi's bedroom, but there was no one in sight. The imprint of a baby crib was clearly visible. He was still too late. Little did he know Kurumi had escaped from the clinic and immediately went to the place where the church children were kept. After successfully rescuing them, she let Yuzuki take the children to the car while she went back into the base to retrieve the newborn baby. At this time, she had no idea that Hibiki was in the base. With a push of the pedal, she drove quickly in the direction of the church. Hibiki stayed by Kurumi's bed for a while, then walked out of the base. Miyagi, who was on guard, saw him come out and delivered some important news. About 10 minutes ago, the headband man had returned to the base, furiously shouting that he would kill everyone. His men were searching everywhere and happened to encounter the limping boss. They circled him. Seeing this, the boss calmly threw away his cane, pulled out a grenade from his pocket, and pulled the pin without hesitation. It wasn't long before the headband man heard the loud noise and rushed over, only to see bodies littered on the ground. His rage was palpable. Just then, Kuwata also stumbled over. Seeing the headband man, he asked if the killer of his sexy teammate was really June. The man didn't bother to pretend anymore and revealed that it was he who killed his sexy teammate to attract zombies. Kuwata was so angry that his face was nearly distorted. As he prepared to confront him, he was splashed with a bottle of acid by the headband man. He curled up on the ground, letting out painful wails. After that, the headband man jumped into a truck and ordered his men to head to the church. He vowed in a chicken voice to make Kurumi, who had saved the children, pay the price. Unfortunately, his chicken voice was clearly heard by Miyagi, who was hiding nearby. Hibiki also learned the man's whereabouts and was anxious. He immediately drove off to pursue, leaving his other companions behind. By this time, Kurumi had already arrived at the church with Yuzuki and a few children. But the cult leader was arrested, and the steward, who was in charge, had become the person with power here. When he learned that Kurumi came from the X organization, his attitude became very nasty, and he even took away her child. Yuzuki wanted to stop the steward but was slapped down. Poor Kurumi, like the former cult leader, was locked in a large prison. Not long after, the guard on duty was suddenly shot dead. It turned out that the headband man from the X organization had arrived. Unexpectedly, they had released the zombies from the factory. The manor had become a living hell with zombies running around everywhere. Innocent people didn't have time to react and became zombies' snacks. Hiragi went to the prison and opened the door lock where Kurumi was detained. Finally, she looked at the soon-to-be zombified cult leader and couldn't help but throw the keys over. The manor was already in chaos, but Kurumi did not plan to escape. She had to find her own child. After looking carefully for a while, she only saw bodies everywhere, and she couldn't find any trace of her baby. Hiragi stayed by her side, killing a few zombies easily, like smashing smelly turds. As the larger crisis was about to arrive, the headband man shouted, letting his men disperse with the zombie horde, killing the pitiful survivors. One of the men in black encountered Hiragi, who told Kurumi to go first, and she would stay to cover their retreat. After a fight, Hiragi was at a clear disadvantage, being suppressed without the power to fight back. She picked up the arm guard left by Hiro and blocked the man in black's fatal blow. The sharp blade on it even pierced the guy's throat. Hiragi held the arm guard in disbelief, as if Hiro was right by her side. On the other side, Yuzuki was moving around, trying to hide with the children. From time to time, she had to fend off the zombies that were chasing them. The accompanying steward behaved like a coward and spent the entire time hiding and cowering. The followers begged him to find a solution, but he simply shrugged and walked away. As they moved, another zombie appeared from behind. Shockingly, it was the cult leader who had turned into a zombie. The sight terrified everyone, scattering them in all directions. A child happened to fall, but to everyone's surprise, the leader, despite being a zombie, showed no intent to harm. Instead, he gently picked up the child. Seeing other zombies approaching, he even used his body to shield the child from the attackers. Despite his transformation, it seemed he still had a subconscious desire to protect the child. After struggling with the zombies, he used up the last of his life force, his final words to ask Yuzuki to eat him if she was hungry. Meanwhile, the headband man had clearly gone into a killing frenzy. By chance, he encountered the fleeing steward and killed him with a single strike, ending his cowardly life. The man accidentally stumbled upon Kurumi's child. He then went to the courtyard and threatened Kurumi, who ran out to stop him. This was exactly the outcome the headband man was hoping for. As he prepared to shoot her, an arrow flew in, taking him down. It turned out that Hibiki had arrived. Amidst their struggle, Kurumi picked up a gun and shot the headband man dead. Hibiki stood up with a complex expression on his face. After facing countless hardships, the star-crossed lovers had finally reunited. When the chaos in the mansion finally settled, Hibiki and Kurumi went to find Yuzuki, intending to take her away from the church. However, after experiencing all that had happened, Yuzuki decided to stay and look after the children. Hibiki didn't express any disappointment. On the contrary, he looked at Yuzuki approvingly, extending his hand to show support for her decision. Meanwhile, in the X organization, Yoon had already treated her wounds at the base. She wanted Shinji to save June, but he refused and shot Yoon on the spot. His reason for harming her was bizarre. He claimed she knew too much as a doctor. Knowing her shitty life was nearing its end, she used all her strength to crawl over her brother. She slowly took out a flower ring, revealing that she had known all along that the man in front of her was not June, but June's twin brother, who had been abducted when he was a child and rarely mentioned. The flower ring was a beloved toy from their childhood. Not long after, Yoon and her brother held hands and closed their eyes together. Meanwhile, Shinji was frantically searching the base. Upon seeing several bottles of golden liquid, he became excited. Suddenly, Miyagi appeared. Her sharp intuition told her that the man in front of her was not as simple as he appeared. Shinji did not try to hide anymore. He took off his glasses and proudly declared that he was the son of the genius Dr. Shuto. It was no surprise that he had killed Yoon earlier, as she had once betrayed his father. The scene shifts to Hibiki and Kurumi taking their child to a deserted beach. Under the blue sky and white clouds, the waves accompanied them. This was a moment just for their small family. Hibiki finally showed a smile that hadn't been seen for a long time. However, when he saw the scar on Kurumi's face, he fell silent. Kurumi seemed unaware and continued to chatter about how to raise their child into an adult. It seemed like aspirations for their future life, but Hibiki knew it was her way of preparing for the end. He saw a sad look appear in her eyes. The family spent the afternoon like this. Kurumi knew the inevitable was coming. She reluctantly took off the engagement ring that Hibiki had given her and put it around their child's neck. Then they went to the seashore together. Kurumi took off her headband, revealing half of her infected face. It turned out that she had been suffering from the virus all along. For the sake of their child, she had been pretending to be strong. Now, finally reunited with Hibiki, she could leave this world at peace. Instead of transforming into a zombie when the time came, she preferred to die at the hands of her most beloved. This was her final wish in life. Hibiki knew he couldn't change the outcome. In the end, he could only hold back his tears as he pulled the trigger. Hibiki stood beside Kurumi, his eyes filled with sorrow. He used almost all his strength to bury his loved one by the sea. He looked incredibly desolate, but he couldn't wallow in his sorrow as he still had a child to look after. However, upon returning to the car, he discovered that the child was missing. The next moment, the car exploded with a loud bang, causing Hibiki to be instantly thrown to the ground. However, the movement of his fingers indicated that he had not died from the explosion. With that, both Season 2 and 3 of this drama come to an end. This is Daniel CC Movie Channel. Stay safe and enjoy your day.